이게 돌아가시고 나서 무슨 이 개발소가 지금 오늘 쉬고 먹어야 저 시장도 좋아. 근데 너무 추워서 그래서 이거를 준비해 주시면 저라 무슨 저는 바로 넘어가고 왜 너무 못해. 너무 아시나 그냥 아주 지금라도 지금하기 좋아하는 So this is how we make the connection. Okay? And 도대체 몰라 니마 오늘 주주네 잡으래 간데 샤트라고 보존 나오게 이 가도 샤트네 니 이처럼 다시 먼저 나지 니 잉글리시 시키나지 이 비용스 필로소피다 니 PhD 리지스터스 인스나 아니 이제 이스타가 참나 이제 이제라 여러분들이 principal English translator 촬영하고요. 상당히 무엇이 나고요. 한 정말 디톤에 지금 지금 자와다나 같은 교육을 차고요. 이 맛에야 로트즘라 촬영 먹고 싶으시는 거예요. 조심 받으세요. 아니 이 맛에 아니 차들 좀게나 차들 같이 콜라보레이션 여러분들이 촬영 먹고 싶나요? 그래서 먹고 싶지 않은 거죠. 아니 이거 되라 이상 he's an adjunct professor at the Faculty of Religious Studies at McGill University in Montreal, and he's also a visiting scholar in School of Medicine at Stanford University. And he, mind and life, somehow over he's been involved with mind and life throughout the years since its inception. And he's a board member and he's board of directors of it. And he's chairman of English Council. And he's a founder and president of the Institute of Tibetan Classics. Tibetan Classics Challenge. We have a wonderful website. Manche Shujyo Chabet translate Chabet and 먼저 로 망보톤에 가서 지금 그래서 지금 슈데리 그저 공부인도 그림 이게 취미로 따가워 이게 제가 그들 몰라 지금 배우고 있어. 근데 가서 보시네. 그래서 내가 지금 렉처 시리즈 보는데 내 소리를 못 배우면서 한번 축진이 스피커 렉처 시리즈 하나. 그래서 로 이동 축진을 같이 이 last couple of months ago 먼저 보고서 하게 서비스 서비스 하는 거는 먼저 민 술을 먼저 찍게요. 미술을 되는 식으로 지금 좋아하게 된 그거를 하게 됐어. and you would his own is 보다 his own is repair, right? His own is the new large and his senior repairs, right? And then also 남도 제시는 사실 중요한 이슈는 좋아하는 분들 좋게 보여줄 수 있는 그리고 만들
numbers of how many of you can actually follow that? How many of you raise your hand? So, but looks like majority of you will be more comfortable with English, right? You can follow this. Please appreciate. And I think today, although as a Tibetan, speaking to members of the Tibetan community in another language is a little bit odd. But on the other hand, since the main aim of my coming here is to have an opportunity to interact with you, particularly with the students, perhaps it may be better if I at least make my preliminary remarks in English so that you can follow it easily. And then probably what I will do is I will speak for about maybe 20 minutes or half an hour, and then we will leave the rest for some kind of interaction, question and answers. And then if there's not that much questions, then I'll follow up some concluding remarks. Okay? That will be the form. First of all, I would like to say that it's a pleasure for me to have this opportunity to meet with you all. My sister lives here and her family, and I do come to the Boston area quite often because the Mind and Life Institute is now relocated to the Amherst area, and as a member of the board, and particularly as the chair of the Mind and Life Institute, I do have to come to meetings quite often. And then secondly, because Harvard University is based here, and occasionally through the Mind and Life we have some affiliated conferences and meetings. So I do end up quite often in the Boston area, but I basically come and I just leave, since the opportunity to take time off. But this time, when my sister found out that I was going to be here for 2 days, I have 2 days of meeting starting tomorrow, and she insisted that I come at least a day earlier, because normally when I come it's during the weekdays, and you meet only during the weekend. So it was very difficult to coordinate the time. It's not that I don't have time, but it's, often when I come here, generally it happens to be during the weekdays, so it can work out. Anyway, so today I'm glad that it worked out, and I would like to thank the Boston Tibetan Association for inviting me. And also, Boston, there are many Tibetan associations across North America. And in some ways, historically, Boston Tibetan Community Association turned out to be important. And in the future, when history of Tibet is being written, the Boston Tibetan Association's name will be prominent. The reason for that is obvious, because our current Sejong, elected Prime Minister, happened to come from your community. This is something I think the members of the Boston community really take pride, that our new leader came from this small community. And as I said before, when future historians write about the experience of Tibetan struggle in exile, the Boston Tibetan Association's name will be there, quite prominent. So this is something that you all need to take pride in. Another important thing is that the example of Losung Sangye really says something very powerful about the experience of Tibetans in North America. And particularly when someone, and as an individual, take the initiative and really take advantage of all the opportunities that comes in one's way. And this is something very, very important about being a North American. So in some ways, all of you who are here, you have to always remember that you are not just Tibetan, you are also Tibetan American. And this is an important part of your identity. Because quite often what happens is that, communities coming from the immigrants, often they have conflict adjusting into a new cultural and political environment, and often tends to look always backwards to their own original community and forget the sense of responsibility that they have to their host nation, which is, in your case, the United States of America. And the history of the United States of America is a very interesting one. And as Americans, you also need to take that part of your identity seriously. So you have to always think, I am an American, Tibetan American. So in my case, I'm a Tibetan Canadian, I'm not an American. So I think it is important because in the end, it's not a question of, either or. Either I'm a Tibetan or an American. It's not a question of, if I adopt this identity, then I have to let go of the other. So the real challenge for the younger generation is to be able to live comfortably and with a sense of pride of your dual aspect of your identity as a Tibetan, but also as an American. And in this respect, North America as a whole, is a much better environment than Europe. If you compare North America and Europe, North America is a nation of immigrants. So any new immigrant community that settles in North America, once you become an American, you are on a totally equal par with any other American. Now there's only one difference, which is if you want to run for the office of the United States of America, president, then you have to be born in the States. That's the only office that is, there is a condition for which birthright, you have to be, you cannot be just a naturalized citizen. You have to be born in the United States of America. But other than that, everything else is really open to any members of the immigrant community. And unlike Europe, most of the countries in Europe are very, very old countries. So they are not immigrant nations. Canada and US are immigrant nations. So once you become naturalized and become American or Canadian, then you are totally equal with any other members of the community. Therefore, it is important to take pride in being American. And also, one of the important things about that is then when you go into education, when you seek opportunities in employment, okay? Sometimes I have seen this among Tibetan communities. Tibetan communities tend to be quite insular. We think only within ourselves, and we start making comparisons within ourselves, very small community. And when you talk within your own Tibetan community, you become very proud. But actually, this is what happens in India. In India, one of the reasons why the majority of the Tibetans in India have not really excelled at the higher education level is because we always compete among ourselves instead of competing with a larger Indian community and Indian society, particularly in the education and employment area. So here in North America, if you can see yourself as an American, Tibetan American, then you will see yourself as equal to anybody around you. Then you will have a sense of confidence. You have to make a distinction between being arrogant and being confident. Being confident and proud is important. You have to believe in your own ability. If someone can do this, I can do this. If opportunity is given. So this is very important. Of course, arrogance is not a very admirable quality, because arrogance automatically creates the tendency to look down on others. Whereas taking pride and being confident doesn't involve that kind of negative tendency towards others. So here, you can see yourself as not just Tibetans or not just Tibetan refugee. If you can see yourself as a Tibetan American, then you will be able to see yourself as one among equals, and then you will be able to compare yourself against the best, and whether it is in the education area or it is in the employment area. And this is where I think the younger generation particularly really need to remember, okay? And especially in your case, you cannot think that you are just like any other American children. You have to remember your own history, because in your case, your parents made a lot of sacrifices. When they came from India, their entire life in India, they lived as refugees, no saving. And I have gone through that experience myself. Until I became a Canadian citizen, I had this big yellow book, which basically says the bearer of this document is a Tibetan refugee, stateless, living in India. And that's the document the old Tibetans had, your parents had it when they moved here. And that document, every time you cross a border, it reminds you that you are a refugee, that you are a citizen. Because everybody else who is traveling is carrying a real passport. Your parents would have to carry this yellow document, which even the size of it, the original one is very big. It was made in kind of cloth paper, and it had very few visa sheets. And at every border crossing, they will look at you and say, "Where are you coming from?" Almost as if you are from Mars, Because then the immigration officers have never seen anything like that. So this is the struggle your parents have gone through. And as Tibetans, we are also Asian, and part of our value is to respect our elders, respect our parents particularly. And one of the things that marks the Asian communities and the many traditional communities separate from the modern society is a respect for the elders, respect for our parents, and also a sense of community, sense of belonging to a community. And in this respect, I think, even as children living in America, you have all the opportunities and freedom. But being part of the community, you are very, very fortunate. Because if you look among your classmates, an average educated American family, the way in which modern society is structured is very, very, isolated. Families tend to live on their own. Sizes of the families are small, and unless you make an effort in social life, you don't really have any sense of belonging to any particular community. And that is, in some ways, you can say, okay, that's wonderful because it gives you a lot of freedom. You don't owe anything to anybody. But on the other hand, it also makes your life very isolated. And this is one of the reasons why a lot of people in modern society are very lonely. Because outside their own family environment, they don't really have any strong emotional connection to anything. In the old days, there were church communities. People were members of the church parish, and then they participated in Sunday school, Bible reading, they go to church. But as societies become more and more modernized, become more and more secular, these kind of traditional institutions and structures break down. So people have less and less commitment or connection with anything larger than their own family or themselves. So that makes living a life in a modern society very, very lonely. This is one of the main reasons why there is so much depression, anxiety, loneliness in modern society. And some modern psychologists even refer to them as modern malaise, sickness, modernity. And that is widespread. But as members of the Tibetan community, having a sense of belonging to the community, the association, where your people that you know is not confined just to your own family. You know people with whom you have no blood relations. So many of the people here, you don't have immediate blood relations. You are not what we call piya. So outside your piya circle, you have connection. And the connection comes from the fact that you are all members of this one Tibetan community. And in our case, unlike other traditional communities, we are also very fortunate to have a direct personal connection with His Holiness the Dalai Lama. His Holiness is not only an individual, very amazing leader, very kind, passionate, wise leader, but also he is someone who has a tremendous international standing. Today, if you ask all over the world, whether America, Europe, Asia, Africa, who do you admire among world leaders? His Holiness's name comes almost always on the top. It doesn't really matter whether you're a Buddhist or Asian or white or black, or his name comes always on the top. And he has been on this international stage for so long. And we as Tibetans, we have direct personal connection with him. And because of that, also there is a tremendous goodwill everywhere in the world, including in the ethnic Chinese world as well, to the Tibetan people, because of what His Holiness stands for the world. And in many ways, His Holiness represents a sense of hope and sense of optimism in the larger world. And I remember many years ago in Vancouver, there was a public talk by His Holiness and the South African Archbishop Thupten, who is another Nobel laureate, was introducing His Holiness. And one of the things that he said in his introductory remarks really struck me. And the Archbishop said, the reason why Dalai Lama is so loved by so many millions all over the world, including himself, is simple. Because he makes you feel proud of being a human being, because he is one of us. That's a very, very beautiful statement, because a lot of people look in His Holiness. What they see is the best of humanity. We're not talking about being Buddhist or being a Tibetan. We're talking about simply being a human being. What as human beings can you become? So a lot of people see His Holiness the best of human side. And Tibetans, as members of the Tibetan community, whether we like it or not,
we have direct personal attention with this figure. And this is something that we all need to recognize. And I often tell younger generations that in some ways, our life, our job of keeping the culture alive, it has been made simple by the fact that His Holiness is alive. We all just lean on Him. He's like a big rock, We all just lean on Him, and we all enjoy the glory that He represents. So I think it's important to take that notice. But at the same time, it's also important for individuals like ourselves to always ask ourselves, what can I, as an individual Tibetan, do to ensure that this culture, our language, and our identity as people survive? So it's one thing to rely completely on His Holiness, but it is something else to make meaning out of this individually. So I wanted to share these thoughts with you, because sometimes what happens is that we are everybody's involved in our day-to-day life, and in the busyness of detailed aspects of the day-to-day life, we forget. And many of these are very, very natural parts of our way of life and way of thinking, but we take that for granted. So sometimes it is helpful if someone comes from outside your community and reminds you of that. Because what I have said up to now, there is nothing new. All of you have heard about it. I may have said it slightly differently. And in my own case, I have lived in England and I now live in Canada. And every now and then, I remind myself, how fortunate I am as a Tibetan, to be a member of this community, and to be born into this community at this very, very critical stage in Tibetan history. What is going to happen in the future, nobody can tell. But the present is real. And what the present reality of our Tibetan community is to really ensure that our generation, and your generation, make sure that the word Tibetan doesn't get forgotten and left only in history books or a museum. So that's our responsibility. We have to, each one of us has to remember that we are a member of this very unique community at a very important particular point in history. And each of us has to really always remind ourselves that we have a responsibility to really make sure that we continue to keep the name Tibet alive and Tibet being a Tibetan alive. Now, on the personal level, each one of you, the boys, you have to pay a little bit of attention. I noticed that the girls are paying much more attention to the boys. Already there you begin to see a gender divide here. So, I can see that some of you are probably grade 2, grade 3. I think the youngest one probably is in kindergarten. How old are you? Look at you. You. But the two small ones. How old are you? In the front. How old are you? 5? Look at you. Look. Lama. 6. And then it's grade and later. So anyway, there's a whole range of age, so it's a little difficult for me to try to teach. But as children, as students, your first responsibility is to your studies. Okay? And with studies, there are certain things which are very basic. Language skills, math skills. These two you really have to work on, and if possible, those who can afford should also take musical instruments. Because math and music are two things that takes a lot of time of practice. So if you don't do it from a young age, it's very difficult to master. And of course, taking up a musical instrument is a lot more work for the parents because they have to drive you around. But in some schools, they have after-school music lessons. And the reason why I'm suggesting this is that music opens your brain in a different way. There's now increasing research that comes out, and music really taps into a particular part of your brain which has to do with creativity, artistic kind of, an appreciation of art and beauty and aesthetics. And math, of course, everybody knows. So the math and music are two things that you have to start quite early, and they require thousands and thousands of hours of practice. Okay, so you really have to, when you are young, you really have to pay attention, and particularly with respect to math. If you don't keep your math up, after a certain point, the whole science field and the economics field will be completely closed to you. So you have much less choice when you go into higher education, like university or college level education. Because if you don't have the basic math to go with it, then you can't go to any of the science disciplines. You can't go into many of the business schools or the economics field and commerce. So that whole area of professional life will be completely closed to you. So whether you go into that field or not is completely up to you. But you should not ignore certain basic skills like math, so that when you get to that age, you have no choice. Because you just don't have the basics to go into these areas. So this is, I give this advice to my two daughters, so I'm giving them to you here as well. When my two girls were small, I told them, when it comes to math, there is no compromise. There is no compromise when it comes to math. And I told them that when they come to the university age, whether they go to science or commerce or humanities or history or art, it's entirely up to them. But I want them to be able to make the choice on the basis of what they think is the best for them. Not because they don't have math to go to science school. So this is something that please keep in your mind. Okay, math can be a lot of hard work and drudgery, but on the other hand, math can also be like a computer game. Essentially, what you are doing with acquisition of math skills is learning to play with numbers. Literally, it's just a game with numbers, and it's all to do with structures and functions of this mathematical, equations. So, for example, when you say 2 plus 2 is 4, it's basically your 2 and 2, and the functional thing is the additional mark. And if you change that functional factor, you 2 minus 2 would be 0. So it's simply by changing the functional factor, you get different answers. So math is basically learning to be able to play with numbers. And then the rest of the education in the humanities, what you're doing is you're beginning to learn to play with concepts. And as you become more and more sophisticated, you learn to start thinking in abstract. Initially, when you're in the kindergarten, everything is very concrete. This is table, you touch. What is the color of table? How far is the table? Concrete, experience-based learning. And as you get a little older, your brain develops, you start learning how to think in abstract terms. And as you become more and more educated, then you learn to think in terms of many different levels of abstract thinking. So, and being able to follow a line of argument. So this is basically what it means to be educated. You are learning to juggle many different things at the same time. And also you are learning to cultivate your what they call working memory, where you are able to keep many information in your temporary memory, for a short period of time, so that you have a lot of point of reference. So then, formal education is completely indispensable. Without formal education, it doesn't really matter how bright you are. So the formal education, in my case, was in the monastic environment. But it's the same thing, when you are young, your brain is like a muscle. And if you don't exercise it, you don't have muscles. It's just like a body, The more you exercise it, the more muscle you get, the more flexible you become. The same way that when you are in your school, if you don't take education seriously, and if you immediately give up the moment it becomes difficult, then your brain It's like an untrained brain. Okay, so it's as simple as that. And as children, you really have to take education seriously so that you don't rely always on your parents saying, "Oh, have you done your homework? What are you doing?" So this is where you have to take responsibility. And as Asian immigrants, Asian Americans, Asians have a reputation in America of being very educated and committed to education. And we Tibetans are also Asians. Sometimes we tend to be a bit lazy. We like, even in India, I know a lot of Tibetan students in the universities. If the choice is given between playing a basketball game or doing studies, they would rather go for basketball game. No? So I think Tibetans generally are easygoing, and also along with that comes a certain element of laziness. But in North America, the Americans are really go-getter. Really, there's a Tibetan saying, so the highest office in Tibet, based on merit and accomplishments, is the head of the Ganden tradition. It's called the throne holder of Ganden Chiba. There is a saying that if a mother's son has education, nobody owns the Ganden throne. In other words, everybody can get there. This is the attitude of America. So America really as a society is a society of opportunity, but also a society of optimism and self-confidence. And you need to take that, embrace that positive aspect of American culture. And also, one of the things that as Tibetans that you need to also understand, and I also tell the Tibetan community, is that, when you become highly educated, you gain, for example, like there have been among some Tibetan societies, for example, from the Tibetan Association of Northern California, there was one girl who obtained gold scholarship. So when these kind of, very high-profile scholarships are, received by Tibetans, that in itself is a tremendous contribution to the cause. Sometimes we are very narrow-minded. When we think of serving the Tibetan cause, we immediately think of going out on the street, carrying a flag and shouting against the Chinese occupation. Yes, that's one way of doing it, but that's not the only way. Imagine if someone like Tenzin Selden from Northern California, from the Tibetan community, receives a Rhodes scholarship. Of course, all the advertisement, publicity that goes with it is going to say Tibetan girl. And that in itself is a tremendous contribution to the cause, because it not only draws attention to our ethnicity as Tibetans, but also it powerfully demonstrates that Tibetans are like any other advanced cultures and societies where if the opportunity is given, we can excel in everything. And this is where I think we need to have a much more sophisticated way of thinking. What is the best way to make our contribution, make my contribution? We should not only think in terms of, political activism. Political activism is very important. That needs to go on. There are also many other ways in which each one of us can contribute. So, for example, here we have maybe about 50 or 60 students. If among you, someone managed to get to Harvard University or Stanford or Yale or Princeton or one of these Ivy League universities, that in itself is an achievement. There's a small Tibetan community from Boston able to produce children who go to these Ivy League American universities. It's fantastic. That in itself, our brothers and sisters in China, you can see how many of them try to get to Harvard. And if you say, I'm a Harvard graduate, in the East Asian societies, particularly in the Chinese communities, there is a tremendous prestige for being a Harvard graduate. That's also one of the things that made our current Sejong very, very impressive, because he is a Harvard law graduate and a law scholar. And that, being a Tibetan, being able to compete in that level of education, professional circle, that in itself is a contribution to the cause. And as Tibetans, you also need to, think in those terms, and also at the individual level. You can see how your parents have to struggle to really, this is the typical story of all immigrant communities in North America. The parents are the ones who take the brunt of the hardship, because the parents, in some ways, sacrifice their life comfort to make it easy and give the opportunity for the children. And in Tibetan we say, remember the Krishna. This is a very, very important word as Tibetans. All of you should know, even those who don't speak Tibetan. Okay, you really have to remember this. This is not to put a pressure on you or make you feel guilty, but to really recognize and remember, who brought you to where you are, and what are the causes and conditions that made this possible. Because nothing happens without a cause. Nothing happens without an effort. And your parents really have, because sometimes what I've seen in other Tibetan communities, and I don't think it's happening here in North America, is that children, when they get a little older, when they're teenage is 12 to 16 years, 17 years old. It's a very, very difficult time, developmentally speaking, because there's a lot of things happening in your body, hormonal changes which make you grumpy and angry, and frustrated and confused, because there's a lot of things happening in your body, and that affects you. You are as much a mental being as a bodily being. So in those situations, then especially girls become very susceptible to what their peers think, and sometimes you become embarrassed of being different, and you start acting as if you want to be accepted. You want to be like everybody else. And in those circumstances, what happens is sometimes you tend to be resentful of your own ethnic background, and then you start losing respect for your parents. You use harsh words, you shout back to your parents. And these things happen. We're all humans. So, but in these kind of situations, I think it's very, especially in these situations, it's very important for you to always remember that because it will really calm you down. Because you cannot act as if you are like any other natural Americans, because they have their own history, but you have a different history, and it's in your interest to remember that history. So I think, and also on the part of the parents too, sometimes parents also make the mistake of not adjusting to the new environment, and they use the same style of parenting which they did in India, which works in India, which works in traditional community, but it doesn't work in North America. And in North America, parenting is a sort of a collaborative work. You have to adjust to the children's needs, children's concerns. Children also have to adjust to the parents' concerns, parents' needs, and the difficulties of the parents. So I think there needs to be both sides. And so here, on the part of the parents, they need to be more compassionate and understanding. And they should always keep in mind the well-being of the children first. Because sometimes in traditional societies, we think about, what will others say? It's embarrassing. This is all, in very traditional societies, always have these shame-related reactions to difficulties and challenges. But in these situations, parents need to think, okay, my responsibility is first and foremost to my child. How can I help him? And then worry about what the community members will say later. Not the first reaction should not be, what would others say? And that kind of reaction works in traditional societies, but it doesn't work here. And on the part of the children too, you also have to understand the parents' difficulties, where they come from. So there needs to be, and especially for the children, one thing that you have to remember is that in some ways we are like Italians, that there's a saying in Italian, blood is thicker than water. In other words, when you are blood relations, you should always stick together. So on the part of the children, you should learn to find a deep trust in your parents. So especially when you run into difficulties, whether it is to do with school, fighting, conflict, or anything else, you should first, reach out to your parents. You really have to, learn to develop that trust in your parents. And the parents also need to make an effort that the children trust them first. So, on the part of the children, you really have to remember that the parents always care for you. This kind of a very basic level of trust is the foundation on which then the love and the relationship has to be built. Okay, so I think this is, and if you can do that, then it will be very, very protective, because especially in the teenage years, especially for boys, they run into a lot of social problems, to do with conflict. And in these situations, you need some kind of scaffolding, like a protection from structural protection. And if you have a very strong trust-based connection with your parents, then you cannot go too wrong. If you start to go a little bit wrong, the parents can help you, nudge you. And if you start going in that direction, your parents can help you. But if you don't have that very basic trust with your parents, and then you end up having a harmful, negative friends, you can easily veer towards a different direction. And this is where having a strong traditional community like Tibetans is very, very important. Okay, so, and we Tibetans always say Hunya. Hunya are the blood relations. So sometimes, we can go up to 6, 7 generations, but so the traditional Tibetan sense of belonging is built in a kind of a kinship-based structure. So the closest is the family, your parents, your siblings, then you have the cousins, then you have the second generation cousins. It goes on like this. And this is a network of Biya. And in traditional Tibet, that's how it works, because the Tibetan plateau was very sparsely populated. The communities were not very big, and the geographical condition in Tibet is quite harsh. It's not like here. And so everybody has to pitch in, and it's a very, very communal-based society where blood relations really matter. So if you're going to another place, you introduce someone with your Biya that takes care of you, you go to another place. And this is how the Tibetan structure, works. Now here, we have communities. So I think the Tibetans here, especially the children, you really need to take advantage of that. You should not think, oh my goodness, my father, what is going to say, he's going to get angry. Of course, sometimes parents do get angry. But on the other hand, if you learn to trust them, then they may get angry, but in the end, they have love for you. And that love and caring always triumphs whatever difficulties that comes in the way. And this is something that we, as Tibetans, should really learn to develop. And at least that's what I try to do. Now, I'm a parent of 2 girls, 14 and 16 years old, and I learned to try to establish this trust with my children, so that when they have difficulties and problems, the first thing they will do is to turn towards the parents and ask us to do things, not their friends. Because all their friends are going to be of the same age. What wisdom they can bring. They have the same level of experiences themselves. Whereas if you can learn to trust your parents, then you are able to tap into many years of experience with parents. Okay, so these are very, very basic suggestions I'm giving you. So what else? I think take pride in your heritage as a Tibetan, as an American is important. To be able to learn to compare yourself against mainstream Americans, not just among your own small communities, so that you have a much higher level of expectation and aspiration. And those who have the capacity should not leave just high school, go on to universities. Those who have even more capacity should go on to post-secondary graduate level studies. And here, His Holiness is often reminded communities that if it's a question of funding, then the Tibetan communities others outside here can help, because there's always opportunities for scholarships and fundings and so on. And particularly if you, in the States, if you have the grades, there are huge amount of scholarships available out of one thing that we really have to do is to always, those who are capable, think of excellence. Now, whatever you do, you really do it with passion, and you do it to the utmost of your capacity. So, whether it's music, art, education, whatever it is, if you have a talent, you should not be satisfied with just very, very minimal, basic achievement. You really have to, you set your aspiration and goal high, and then you strive towards it. This is, I think, very, very important. And you should not think that if I really want to serve community, I should go to India, I should work in the trenches, I should work as a nurse in the communities and so on. These opportunities will come, but the first, you have to prove yourself. You have to have the material. You really should. I remember Mrs. Selden, when she was at Stanford, she asked me to be a mentor, and I said, okay, I don't need to be a mentor, but if you want me to occasionally, ask me questions, I'll help you. And one of the things that she was very, very committed to is serve the community, and she wanted to spend some time in India. And I advised against it. I said, this is too early. You always have opportunities. While you are doing so well at the university, you should compete with the mainstream Americans and achieve the highest level that you can go, whether it's scholarship or education. And once you have that, then you're in a much stronger position. The reason why our Sikong is able to perform so efficiently is because he has a Harvard Law degree and Harvard Law experience. If he did not have that, his ability to serve the community and also his ability to command respect from outsiders will be diminished. This is a simple fact of the world. So in your case, I think first is to really commit yourself to study, and having the Sunday school is very, very helpful because acquisition of Tibetan language is not easy, and those who both parents are Tibetan, as much as possible at home you should speak Tibetan. And for writing Tibetan, if you can at least able to learn to read Tibetan, and hopefully there will be more and more materials that are enjoyable that you could read. Unfortunately, at the moment, there isn't that much that you could read in Tibetan that is engaging or entertaining. That is one of the downsides of our Tibetan literary culture, because up until recently, almost 99.9% are all written in Tibetan, are all something to do with philosophy, religion, or psychology, and they're very, not even, up until the 20th century, there was only one novel. There was only one novel, until the 20th century. So even that novel is written in very high poetry that unless you have many years of literary training, you cannot understand. So this is, and one of the things that I've been involved in is to making the acquisition of Tibetan easier by introducing modern drama. Someone is carrying on my book. This is a first attempt to develop a modern grammar for Tibetan so that teachers can teach Tibetan more easily like any other new language, and the students can also learn to read and write more easily. And these are things that we, as scholars of the language, have to work hard to try to make the language more flexible, easier to understand. And also the writers, the Tibetan community, need to write things that are more interesting. Ideally kind of, romantic stories, and, adventure stories, so that children who start reading in Tibetan can continue to, turn the page. At the moment, we don't have that much material, but I think things will change, and it is changing inside Tibet as well. So I think, but having a Sunday school here, and many of the teachers who are teaching this are making a sacrifice because they work through the weekdays, and weekends their day off. Even then, they're out of their loyalty and commitment to the cause and the identity of Tibetan. They're helping you. So I think you should take advantage of this and don't think that, the Sunday morning we have to go to Sunday school or rather play basketball. You shouldn't think of those terms. You should take this as an opportunity because there are many Tibetan communities across the world. Not many have this kind of opportunity. But every single Sunday that you have an opportunity to say Dharma, and it's not that easy because when Westerners learn Tibetan, it's a mighty struggle. And as Tibetan, because you speak it naturally, it's simply a question of learning how to read, and that shouldn't be that difficult. And so I think you should take opportunity and be grateful that you have this hearing course. Okay, so I thought I was going to speak only for half an hour, but I ended up speaking a lot more. So maybe we can have 15 to 20 minutes of questions. So you can ask in Tibetan or you can ask in English. Yeah.
How long have you worked for translating?
Since 1985, so it's almost 27 years. Yeah.
And why did you choose to do this job?
No, I didn't choose. It was more of a coincidence. This was in 1985. I was a monk in South India, and I had been in Dharamsala, and His Holiness was giving a series of teachings, and then the official translator was not in town. So they were looking for someone to replace him for one day. So, and then the word spread around saying that there is a young monk who speaks good English, and one thing led to another. I was picked up, and then I began translating. So it was just more of a coincidence. It was one of those things in life that you don't plan, but when it happens, it's very important to contribute to it. Don't be shy. Ask questions that has, even if it has nothing to do with what I said. Okay, questions that you always thought about Tibet or Buddhism, or you feel like asking your parents. So just take.
You can even ask about funny stories that Yoda has with His Holiness too. I'm sure there's tons of it too. 아마존에 인지
제일 속에 같이나야 나나 이집이 사장에 셰샤부디 시식 같은 오면은 좋아요 하래 틱타스 아릭스도 말이야 후구 소정 지나네 그 로톤에 나한테 말아서 보여줘요 그거에 아직 중수교가 주 나무야 나는 지나는 후구 이제는 거의 원하는 How many of you go to universities here? Three. Okay. So for you, I wanted to share with you that if you hear the information, get the information about the Tibetan workshops in Garrison, okay, so you should take the opportunity at least once. Okay, this is fantastic because one of the important things for young Tibetans is to be able to create networks for yourself. And this is one thing that you have to take advantage of. For example, you should not think that your education, higher education, should take place only within this area. You might end up going elsewhere. In which cases, then the more network that you have Tibetans, and it's not easy. It's not enough simply to have a connection through the Facebook to a larger community. But if you are able to spend a few days in an experience like that workshop, and whatever friendship you form there will have a stronger basis. So even from that point of view, this workshop, this is the third year, and it is a very, the residential workshop. This year, I think there are about 15 students, and I'm Skyping in this evening because this time I have to go. I have a meeting here tomorrow, so I'm Skyping in. And for the ones who are going to university, I think you should definitely take it advantage. Yeah.
On that note, I think I would like to mention that I'm sure there's been only one Rhodes Scholars, maybe two, in the history of Tibetan education. And I'm sure from our group of students here, I'm sure we'll be seeing a couple of them in the future. Because we've got 3 high school students this year. They are graduating. They've already graduated, in fact, and they'll be pursuing their studies in the universities. and they're all going on full scholarship. And this is Lama, she's going to Amos. Sorry, this is Gesam. I'm going to mix up. This is Gesam, going to Amos. Choki will be going to Stanford University. And there's another girl, Pema, she's not here today. She'll be going to, she's taking a gap year this year, but she's going to American University in Georgetown, in DC. But on that particular note, I would like to mention a special need today. Tenzing Lama here today, she is a recipient of this year's the Presidential Award for Academic Achievement at her level in grade 8. So, like I said, we put out a big challenge for our kids, say we got only a couple of these scholars. So in the future, you may hear all of them from Boston as well. So I just want to share that with you. And
so the one who's going to Amherst, you know that Mind and Life has an affiliation with Amherst College. We have a house there, so you should really take an opportunity to visit it. Okay, please, introduce yourself as a Tibetan student from Boston community. And, so there is an occasion that we have programs, and you do take it.
이미 가만히 동아대는 이제 얘기만 치는 것 같으면 좀 부담하지 해드리는 신기했다 평화다 찾아라 지금 양육관에 가기 유명한 제가 손톱을 열어서 유비슈했죠. 네, 이들 실제 나한테 스포츠 지구에도 지내기 하지만 얘기 하다 아주 슬라텔로기 대나라가 그냥 구하다 그냥 하다 지금 점수 지나고 이제는 나 지나는 중에 네 세상 얘기 보고 지어봤어. 네 얘 단단히 지웠어 무슨 얘기 그날이 남백 따르가 뭐가 지금 한 정도 무슨 상태에 네 리더 제외 무조건 체리다 네 따오기 좋다 네 무조건 칠 제외 거는 선택했다 지금 양해지다 되고 기와 되지 이시슈에니 네 마음과 네 그시에 뭐 무슨 뜻이죠 양교도 추디기 지금 여러분들 지시 그렇죠.
Sugar and sugar is not. Okay. You get the question? Okay. So there was a complicated question. I think in my own case, of course, I was fortunate to be brought up as a monk, so I have full exposure with a very high level of education of Buddhist tradition. And one of the things that I recognized early on is that there were many aspects of Buddhist upbringing that was very tough. It's not like it's very expressive, and it's very performance oriented, and also, as I mentioned before, it's a kind of a lonely existence because it's very individualistic, and each individual is supposed to make sense of their own meaning of existence. And here, being a Buddhist, particularly being a Tibetan Buddhist, really makes it easy because you don't have to struggle to make a meaning of your existence. You are already given a framework within which you think about your existence. You have belief in karma, belief in rebirth. All of these are part of your psychological makeup. You see the world in a different way. And I found those aspects of my upbringing really kind of maintain kind of stability in a very hectic life. So that was one thing. And with respect to this, what I wanted to say to children is that as Tibetans, even from very early age, you have to have an emotional connection with important spiritual figures like the Buddha, His Holiness. And this is why in the parents, in your home, I'm sure your parents have photographs of His Holiness displayed on the altar. There are images of the Buddha. So I think you have to grow up, in that kind of environment where, the story of the Buddha and the personality of His Holiness is a very important part of your psychological and emotional makeup, so that you feel emotionally connected to these kind of figures like the Dalai Lama and the Buddha. And ideally, the Tibetans should also know a little bit about the history, the Songtsen Gampo and the coming of Buddhism to Tibet. They are